Good evening. Welcome into the Irish NFL show in partnership with USA Sports. Check out our website, check out the shop in the ILAC Centre. 25% off online with the code NFLIE. Delighted to be with my partners in crime, Colin Cronin. Colin looks like he's back home in Cork as opposed to in his little office. And Frankie Abbott all the way from Milwaukee. How are you guys? Good?
Doing
Good,
great.
sure. We got Cork mentioned. We had the NFL mentioned in the Oireachtas this evening, Brian. It's been a good day.
I haven't had an opportunity to respond to your message, Colin. I saw it earlier on around the mention of the Philadelphia Eagles. I was going to come back with something catchy on Twitter, but I didn't get an opportunity because we have this live show to get to do. There's plenty to discuss, but we do have a special guest, and we're going to bring him in straight away because I think he's coming from the NFL Network studios, and that is Adam Rank returning to the show. Adam, you are looking extremely well. Look, we really appreciate you coming on the show, but to go and get dressed up in the manner in which you did for the show was fantastic.
You know, some of the haters will say that I was dressed up for this Anthony Richardson interview I just did, but I said, no. I'm going on the Irish NFL show. So that is really what I wanted it to be. And I also wanted to counterbalance Frankie's headphones over. What is up with those headphones?
Oh, gotta have them.
Am I the only one who sees the size of those things? Has this been discussed before?
It's just blocking out all the outer stuff that's going on in the world. You know, it just keeps it all on the outside, so I can be focusing on you, Adam.
He has a second.
Milwaukee, you're like filtering out the cold as well.
Exactly.
He got them from Cape Canaveral, Adam. They were part of the Apollo 11 mission, I believe.
Bring the shuttle back.
Adam, I wish we could kind of go back and have you retell the George Costanza-esque story of when you interned, because that was fantastic. But more recently, you kind of Twitter is Twitter, but you broke Twitter once again because you went out there and you named Justin Fields as the best QB in the NFC. People lost their minds. The responses continue to this very day. I woke up today and there was yet more responses to Mr. Adam Ranks putting Justin Fields there. For our viewers and listeners who may not have had the privilege of seeing the piece, to sell us on the idea of Justin Fields as QB1 in the NFC.
Can I give the context of this? Like, I don't want to pull back the curtains too much, but it was a Friday show on Total Access. I'm trying to frame myself a little bit better. I don't want to get too close to the headphones, but you know, I also want to be.
They'll jump into your screen, right?
Yeah, you know what? I gotta be careful. Like, move this way. But in any event, so we're doing this thing, and we're taking callers to Total Access. And they're like, we're going to ask, and Baldinger, God bless him, is like, I don't want to know what the question is. Just surprise us. And I'm like, yeah, I'll play along. This is fun. And then, so they're like, who are your top five? They did want to give me a little bit of a heads up. And like, who are your top five quarterbacks in the NFC? And I said, okay, like, here's my list. And it wasn't too far off because they didn't make the graphic. So it wasn't too far off of what I had. But the person playing the caller was from like Downers Grove. And so he said, Justin Fields being the obvious number one, how would you rank 2 through 5? And of course I'm like, I'll play along. And then I put Jalen Hurts there or whatever. And then, you know, they put out the graphic and I'm like, oh my God. And then like, people didn't see the show, whatever. And then I'm like, I don't feel like I should have to defend it that vigorously because when you look at the quarterbacks in the NFC, I would say, honestly, like, between us, Jalen Hurts deserves to be the number one guy. He got his team to the Super Bowl. I will tell you, though, if you're asking me to project, because I've been on record of saying this, I think that Justin Fields will end up being better than Jalen Hurts. Justin Fields is going to be better than all of these quarterbacks. I am not going to sit here and listen to people try to make the case for Matthew Stafford. Like, Matthew Stafford I don't even know if Matthew Stafford's going to play this year. Like that, a lot of people are assuming a lot. By the way, the social media guy who put that out there just walked by. I was busting his balls today. because this is the first time I saw him since that show. And I'm like, you guys really do like you really do a number to me, and it's fine. I'll play along. Sports is entertainment. Like it's not that serious, everybody. Like I didn't say anything highly offensive, but I will say this. Like I understand that Kirk Cousins had a great year, but he lost in the playoffs in the first round again. Jared Goff was a mirage, and he's going to come back to earth this year. Who are the other guys? I think Derek Carr is very good, but he's learning his ninth system in 11 years. There's not a lot of great, like that's the whole thing of this exercise, and it's just assuming, of course, that Aaron Rodgers is gone. Not a lot of great quarterbacks in the NFC right now. Dak Prescott also deserves to be in the conversation of the best of the top 5. But I'm like, we've really never gotten an opportunity to see Justin Fields in this particular circumstance. And now that he has a true ex-wide receiver with DJ Moore, who DJ Moore, and I know people get upset when you try to compare him to Stephon Diggs or even A.J. Brown. Mike, the numbers will show you that DJ Moore had better receiving numbers than A.J. Brown prior to his arrival in Philadelphia. Stephon Diggs was good, but I think Stephon Diggs and DJ Moore are the same guy. And then we saw what happened when he got to Buffalo. So I think this will be an opportunity for Justin Fields to really show himself. And it's funny when you go through the draft process now and you start to see how prolific of a passer Justin Fields is, because they'll start to compare it. When you see his numbers at Ohio State and you're like, oh yeah, like he threw 41 touchdowns with 3 picks or something in that range. Like, yeah, he's a prolific passer. Now he's going to be able to show it. A lot of those broken plays, which turned into 70-yard touchdown runs, will now be passes to DJ Moore. And we started to see that at the end of last season too. Some of the plays that he was making to David Montgomery. So when I look at that list, I would have had Justin Fields at number 2 anyway, so I would have to go out and defend this regardless. But I think that we're going to start to see him really emerge as a passer with a guy who's going to have some continuity with a second season in Luke Getsy's offense, and realize this is one of the most complicated offenses in the NFL. Russell Wilson couldn't learn it last year. So it's going to take a little bit of time. So I think that right now it looks ridiculous and people will make their jokes. And I'll also say this, and I know this is a longer answer column than you wanted me to give, but I'm going to do it anyways because I'm taking the full 45. I don't care. I know that I'm a little bit biased, but there's also but everybody is biased. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. Like, at least I'm up front. I'm a Bears fan. You know that going in. And the Packer fans know, and the Viking, and anybody who roots for an NFC North team, I kind of understand. But even when you see other people out there, and there's other analysts, and this is not necessarily geared to quarterbacks or anything like that. Like, I'll give you an example. Like Will Anderson, over the last couple of days, I forget who it was. I'm not saying this. I sincerely don't remember who it was. But somebody was like, Will Anderson is a grade 3 defensive lineman, which is just dumb.
Blasphemous.
I don't remember who said it, but it's just nonsense. Now watch, that analyst is going to be hypercritical of Will Anderson for the next decade because he's not going to want to be wrong. And I think there's bias with everybody because they'll know what they said. Like if you didn't believe in like I didn't believe in Justin Herbert coming out of college. I was a little apprehensive about him. Some of his games, like against Auburn, were like real. They're like, I don't know about him. Obviously, he's very good. I would rather just be like, he's better than I thought he was going to be, and just root for him and not have to deal with it, as opposed to like having a cheat sheet of like, well, yeah, I hope he fails. So 5 years from now, I can be like, I was right. So with Justin Fields, I understand that there's a little bit of bias caked in, but you know what? He was still a top 15 quarterback, top 11 quarterback, highly prolific from a major Power 5 blue blood university. So I don't think it's outlandish to say that he's the best quarterback in the NFC, even though I would be conceding that at this moment, Jalen Hurts is better. A quarterback who I did like, by the way, coming out of Oklahoma and Alabama.
Adam, the last time you were on the show was the 10th of March last year, and the reason why I remember it was you were actually live with us when Khalil Mack was traded from the Bears to the Chargers. Now Ryan Poles has pulled off this masterstroke of a trade with the Panthers. You know, we saw it go down late here on a Friday evening, and you were looking through all the various different picks the Bears were getting, and then obviously to have more included. Like, then Ryan Poles goes and he's very active in free agency with all the cap space. Like, right now, like, Bears fans who've had a difficult year can gradually start to see what he's trying to do and put the team back in position to be winning again.
Yeah, you got to love everything. I mean, when you drop from 1 to 9, it usually costs 3 first-round picks. First round pick of that draft the following 2 years. And I like the approach that he took. And this is really something that came out over the last couple of weeks, is that he was very insistent. Instead of a 2025 first round pick, he wanted an established veteran player, whether it was on the offensive or defensive side. I think Burns was the guy that he really wanted, but they ultimately settled on DJ Moore, which I'm not upset at. And it also should give you an indication of where the Bears could be looking in the NFL draft. Now, I've made the case that Jackson Smith and Jigba should be considered, because even with 3 pretty good wide receivers right now, I think having a 4th, especially one who would be on a 5-year rookie deal, is not the worst case scenario. But when you heard about what Ryan Poles is trying to do, and number one, he's building through the draft. He didn't go out there and outspend for Orlando Brown or McGlinchey or any of those guys. He was to the point like, I've got a budget. I've set aside my budget. And if these guys go above my budget, I'm going to look to build in the draft. And you look at teams like the Kansas City Chiefs, where he came from, and Ian Cunningham came from the Philadelphia Eagles. Those teams started their builds through the draft. Both of those clubs are now at a point where you're adding pieces via free agency. You can bring in a free agent. You're that close. Your Super Bowl window is there. Okay, you can go out and make a couple of nice moves that way. The Bears are not in that position. So being very judicious with his spending allows them flexibility over the next couple of seasons. Acquiring draft capital over the next couple of years will allow them to continue to add piece. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that they move down from number 9 this season. And let's say one of those quarterbacks, looking at Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, if one of those guys slips to number 9, you could also make a deal with some team moving up in the draft to come get them, acquire other draft capital. But it really does feel nice to see an established blueprint. Like Ryan Pace kind of had that mode of like, he was taking a cross-country trip with his kids without a plan. And then whatever the kids were saying, like, let's stop here. Let's do this. He's like, okay, that sounds fun. Let's do this. A trade for that guy. You never got the sense that he was really building this. Actually, that's not fair, because had Mitch Trubisky worked out, I think it would have looked a lot different. So maybe I'm being unfair. That's a little unfair for Ryan Pace. But there were times where his spending seemed reckless. And you're not getting that sense with Ryan Poles. And now when you look at successful, well-run organizations and the way that they operate their business, the Bears are very much starting to follow that model. And I think it honestly stems from Ryan Pace, who kind of got the ball rolling. I mean, Ryan Pace would have liked to have had an assistant GM, would have liked to have had more scouting, would like to have not reported to Ted Phillips and things like that. Ryan Pace sort of died so Ryan Poles could live. But now, and I know that any Bears, even Bears fans will be like, oh, we've seen this before. Like we haven't. We haven't seen a situation, and now Kevin Warren is coming in, a team president that has an NFL background. Notice I don't hate Ted Phillips. I don't feel like he was a bad guy or anything like that, but he wasn't a football guy. And so now you have a football guy in that spot. And I think that that's the most refreshing part of this organization. And I love the idea of moving into a new stadium in a couple of years. And again, looking and getting additional revenue streams that'll help us out down the road. Like, that is a refreshing change of pace. And I understand that our rivals in the NFC North don't want to acknowledge that. I just wish Bears fans would, because it's completely different than it's been over the last 5 years.
Yeah. So my favorite fantasy football quarterback over the past however many years won me a couple titles. Lamar Jackson, everyone's favorite dead horse to beat up on this offseason, can't seem to get away from the conversations about him. So with all of his rumored landing spots, where do you think, from purely a fantasy football standpoint, What is his best landing spot? Where do you think offers him the highest ceiling when it comes to putting up the points in that regard?
I got to do a fantasy question right now.
Oh yeah,
This is.
100%.
I thought we were out here just talking ball. Like this is like you've invited Dave Grohl onto your show, and you're like, hey, you're gonna go have you play a number. Okay, sure. What do you want me to play? I want you to play Breed. Like, bro, I haven't been in Nirvana in 20 years. Can I play something from the Foo Fighters? Can I play Everlong? No. Play Breed. Which, by the way, that's a deep album cut. I know I'm not going to get the credit for that. No, I'm just kidding. I'm teasing.
You got a gold star for that.
I deserve it. I need it a little bit,
By the way, I just inadvertently compared myself to Dave Grohl. So I'll take that, by the way. In any event, the whole thing with the Lamar Jackson, and I was doing my mock draft with a twist. And what I do in my exercises, I don't predict where teams are going to do or where guys are going to go because I'm not tied into the NFL that way. Like I'm not tied in with the agents, so I don't know who's going where. But I'm like, this is what teams should do. And with Lamar, I look at any of these teams who are in the mix for Will Levis or Anthony Richardson. And I love Anthony Richardson's a good dude. I really like him. I think he's a nice guy. I like his persona. I like the way he carries himself. Lamar Jackson's still a better quarterback at this point in the NFL.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're going to risk it on one of these guys or even Hendon Hooker, why wouldn't you just make the deal? Just go get Lamar Jackson. Like, what are you doing, Indianapolis? Don't go after Will Levis. Please don't. Trade for Lamar Jackson. Atlanta, trade for him. Tennessee, trade for him. They won't, but they should. I really like the idea, though, of Lamar Jackson. If I was thinking about, from a pure fantasy situation, like Atlanta would be a lot of fun. Drake London, Kyle Pitts, like, oh my God, Lamar Jackson. And I know part of it was the Greg Roman offense, but like, hey, if Lamar Jackson couldn't get Kyle Pitts going, then nobody's getting them going. Like, at least we would know at this point. Like, okay, it's just not going to work out. Selfishly, for fantasy reasons, I would love to see him in Atlanta. I think that would be my number one spot. I would be a little bit fearful of him being in Tennessee because, I don't know what kind of weapons they're working with. And then a lot of, he's going to hand the ball off a lot to Derrick Henry. And I don't know. I think Atlanta would make the most sense. But ultimately, and it feels like he's going to play in Baltimore for one more season. There's really not, I don't know, the leverage being what it is. It's just not going to work out. I mean, the Jets would be awesome too, but they still seem kind of tight in to Aaron Rodgers. I think Baltimore for one more year with OBJ. I love OBJ being there. The reason, though, is because Mark Andrews should get a lot more opportunities.
Yep.
I mean, Mark Andrews is the number one guy.
Oh,
He's the Cooper Kupp of that offense. And you look what OBJ did with the Rams and how much he helped that team go out there and win a Super Bowl, making clutch plays. Like, OBJ's not going to be a great fantasy option for you, but I think he makes Lamar better, and he's going to make Mark Andrews a lot better, which is hard to believe. But if Mark Andrews remains healthy and can get on the field, he's going to thrive just having OBJ out there. I know that wasn't really your question, but I think Atlanta is where I'd love to see him go, but I think he'll be fine in Baltimore.
I'm glad I could drag you down to the fantasy question, just really
No,
get dirty with
happy
you.
to do it.
I think yeah, just like Dave Grohl would be able to dig into that bag of tricks and play Breed.
You can plant a house, you can build a tree. I got it.
There you go. Adam, I want to talk to you a little bit let's go back into the green room in like Dave Grohl, and let's talk Jim McMahon and a man who we had the good fortune to have on this show, a man who would be very good fun to share a pint of harp with, and I suppose two things. One, tell us about I know you've said before he's your favorite ever Bears player, but that he talks about that sliding doors moment in terms of the awful assault essentially when he gets thrown to the ground. Is there another NFL sliding doors moment that you can think of, or do you have a sliding doors moment that you look on in your life and go, wow, if this hadn't fallen this way, who knows where I'd be?
Yeah, there's always a lot of that stuff. And like when I had McMahon on my show, I remember just like I don't care, like not that I don't care. Like I just to name drop here. I was talking to Anthony Richardson a couple of moments ago, which will be on NFL Total Access today. And like there's nothing to be like I wasn't nervous, and like it's kind of fun to be in a position where like he's not nervous, but like he's been doing these like at great length and is like, and it's kind of fun just to go out there like, hey, you're just chit chatting, free and easy. I wasn't like that with with Jim Mc. I wouldn't be that way with Vince McMahon either. But Jim McMahon, I was still like super scared. Like I was talking to one of my dad's friends or something like, sir, how are you? I don't want to offend you, that kind of way. And thinking about the play in '86, I remember talking to Harry Carson one time, and I go, you guys won that Super Bowl in '86. Like, was it a little hollow because you didn't beat the Bears? Because the Packers ruined McMahon. He's like, no, it's still. I'm like, well, you wouldn't have beat them, right? Like they clubbed you like 38-0 or something. Like, what was different from year to year except their defense was better? No, I don't think. I'm like, no, they weren't. But in any event, sliding doors moment. It is. It's funny, and I teach at Chapman or whatever it is. I teach at Chapman University, and it's a great school, and it's a great college experience. I went to Cal State Fullerton, which was not a great, like, honestly, like I had fun. It was a good time. I don't regret it, but it's not like going to like, Arizona or Texas or one of these great, especially during March Madness, when you see these schools like, it would have been fun to go to, Arizona wouldn't have been because they lose so early in the tournament. But like, and you think about like, if I could do it over, like people are like, if you could do it over again, what school would you go to? What would you do? And I'm like, I always think about that because I'm like, I would go to Cal State Fullerton, and it would be like Sam Beckett and Quantum Leap. Be like, I want to make sure that I'm hitting every step that got me to this spot. Like I would have to join like the same fraternity, take the same class. Like I wouldn't want to veer off the timeline and then be somewhere else because I could very easily be selling real estate right now and having people be like, you know what, you got the kind of voice that you should be on TV. Be like, nah, I would never have been able to do that. Like I don't want to sound like I'm bragging or anything like that, but I'm like, I'm sort of like pretty happy with the way things worked out. There's not like a, I wish I would have done that or could have done that. Now, personally, like I could say like, that would have been fun to try out for Saturday Night Live at some point or something like that. But at the same, like not to risk it, like if somebody's like, hey, you could do it over again. Let's say your parents didn't insist you go to college and you started doing open mics at 17 and, you never went to college and did that. I'm like, I don't know that I would risk it, if that makes any sense. I mean, it would be fun. Like if I could remember everything that I just did and be like, okay, a choose your own adventure thing. But it's like, I don't think there's not like too many things that I would want to change. Maybe a couple of instances. I wouldn't want to break my foot playing basketball. So I think that day I might have changed. But you don't know. Like, is that going to be the thing, the butterfly effect, that if I don't break my foot, then I end up like in some weird thing where I'm now the Boston sports guy? I don't know. Whatever it is, I will go back and I will keep it to the NFL. And I really cannot help but wonder when I look back over recent history, like about Patrick Mahomes. And I know a lot of Bears fans will be, they're like, if we got Patrick Mahomes, like, what would Patrick Mahomes is so good, but I think he'd be very good. You know what I'm saying? Like, he would be a Pro Bowl quarterback. Matt Nagy would still be coaching the Bears. But I just think they would be in this, like, disappointing stretch of where they're not. I just think of players like that. Another good one, too, is like, what if the 49ers had drafted Aaron Rodgers? And remember Alex Smith's first couple years with Mike Singletary as the head coach. Like, and knowing Aaron Rodgers as we know now, like, could have easily seen him flame out. And he could be this guy. Like, I could see Aaron Rodgers, because he's talented, and he would stick around. but he could also be this guy who would come in for a couple of games and then, I don't know. I find it hard to imagine him having the career that he would have had. Well, what about Alex Smith? Like, how good does Alex Smith become? If he's sitting behind Brett Favre and he comes in, I don't know. Like, I think about that probably more than I should. Like, I'm always fascinated, especially because Alex Smith, when Jim Harbaugh arrived, turned out to be a pretty good quarterback. In Kansas City was like a pretty good quarterback, but he's still not the elite level. I don't know. I'm always curious how that would have worked out. The sliding doors, as you say.
Adam, you did this piece on Total Access a couple of weeks ago. It was like a domino effect where you're kind of reducing the teams in terms of their rebound season. I think you ended up with the Saints, and you talked about how you felt Derek Carr would fit in well there. Are they your team that you think will rebound next season? And I'll throw another one at you. For as good as the work the Bears have done in the division in terms of what they've done in free agency, how impressed are you with the Lions and the story that they're kind of creating there?
Well, I'll start with the Saints because I do believe in Derek Carr. I think, again, this is another one too, where I think about David Carr, who's a friend of mine. I would consider David a friend. Like, there's guys I work with, but David is somebody that I can text. There was if there's something I feel like he's a friend of mine. I often wonder about him. Like, God, if you could have just gone someplace other than Houston, where Tony Banks wasn't trying to screw him over, where the offensive line wasn't terrible, like, what kind of career could he have had? And I always am like, that was the era that if you were the Bears quarterback in 2005, like, we would have won the Super Bowl. Like, I can confidently say that if he had been the guy. But in any event, I think Derek going to New Orleans, his skill set combined with Chris Olave, if Michael Thomas can play, Michael Thomas is going to thrive. If Michael Thomas is healthy, he's going to thrive with Derek Carr. It's going to be such a good matchup with them. And their defense continues to be pretty good. And you're in a division that's not as good. The Falcons made a lot of cosmetic moves, adding guys like Calais Campbell, who are good. Like, they're good locker room guys or whatever, but Calais Campbell's best football is behind him. We really don't know what they're going to do at the quarterback position. So I feel like New Orleans I like Carolina, what they're putting together, but they're still going to have a rookie quarterback. So New Orleans, by virtue of their division, and Tampa Bay, I think at this point, like, they're playing for Caleb Williams, right? Like, this is pretty much what they got. Like, you're starting Baker Mayfield. Like, you've given up. You don't want to win. You're trying to tank. Like, that's okay. You gotta sort of make it look like you're trying, but like, you have no. Todd Bowles is not going to survive the season. He's this year's Lovie Smith, and his only hope is to somehow screw the Buccaneers, out of getting the top overall pick. That's his main goal, I think, this year. So New Orleans has got a great shot just to get to the playoffs. I don't think that they're a Super Bowl contender, although in the NFC, like, not a lot of great teams in the NFC. So I think they got a really good chance. But the Lions are in such an interesting spot because this could be the team that everybody wants to root for because we love them on Hard Knocks. Everybody gets behind them because everybody is going to pick them to win the division. And you know that never works out. Anytime a group of fans or of NFL people come together like, the Lions are the team that are going to win the North, and they're going to establish this thing, and we love Dan Campbell, and Jared Goff was so good last year, and then all of a sudden, they're 6-10. God damn that 17th game. 6-11. That's the stupidest. 17, Shohei Ohtani's number, so that's fine. I understand that that's what the NFL's doing. Like, they're paying homage to the greatest baseball player of all time. That works. Shohei, my personal savior. The Lions could be that team that falters, but it is set up so well for them that so many things would have to go impossibly wrong for them not to be better this year. I think, number one, bringing in David Montgomery and getting rid of Jamal Williams, it is such an easy thing to have everything go so well for you last year. Like, let's keep the team together. Let's keep together. Nope, the Lions went out there and got better. Like, Jamal Williams is a great interview. David Montgomery is a way better player. He just is, and I'm not going to argue it. You've got these 2 picks. They very well could end up with Jalen Carter, which would be super fair. But they can end up like whoever they draft. They could get, Christian Gonzalez. Maybe if they want to bring in like Joey Porter Jr. or somebody, or even, one of the Lucas Van Ness or somebody like that. Like they're going to get a stud top 10 player, which they have no business getting, but the Rams were so generous. And then they got that other pick at 18. So they got this wild card, like, let's just pick the best player available, no matter who it is. And you go at it that way. And then you got another pick at 18. It feels impossible for them not to be good next year. And then I see Jared Goff, and I'm like, okay, nothing's impossible. Nothing's impossible. And I know Jared Goff played well, but I'm very impressed with them. I will say this, and I know people ask me this all the time. They're like, which spot would you rather be in? Would you rather be the Lions, or would you rather be the Bears? And I say this as a very biased person. I would rather be the Bears right now, because when you have your quarterback, it makes your world so much different. And I told this to a couple of people. I was on a radio show in Carolina, and I'm like, look, with CJ Stroud, whichever quarterback you end up with, if he's your guy, and it's proven within the first couple of games or over the course of the season, like, we found our quarterback of the future, you won't really miss that first round pick the following. I mean, it sucks. Like, it would be great to be picking in the top 10 or wherever it is. But if you have your quarterback, the world is so much different as opposed to like, I don't know. Like, look at the Commanders. Great defense, really good wide receivers. They can play. Like, who are you starting at quarterback? The Falcons. The Falcons can make as many moves as you want. Who's your quarterback? The Raiders. Who's your quarterback? So if you get the quarterback situation handled, you're in a good spot. And so I love what the Lions are doing. They would be my favorites to win the NFC North right now. But you still, at some point, I mean, Goff was good. I can't take that away from him. Can we see it year to year? That'll be the big question.
I think last year's example, you said about everybody's picking the Lions next season to win the division. I know from our perspective on the show, we all picked the Colts to win the AFC South. And look how that played out with Matt Ryan. Everybody thought that was a good fit. Didn't work out.
Love that fit. Yeah. That's a great call.
At the time.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, Bijan Robinson, I think everyone kind of consensusly agrees he's one of the best college football running back prospects of the last however many years, arguably the best if, some people want to believe that, put him over Saquon. But it seems like, when you look at, both just mock drafts, a lot of fans seem to believe he'll kind of end up slipping to like that 15-20s kind of range, which feels a little bit crazy when you consider the type of offensive weapon he is. And I think when you compare it to the receiver class, maybe isn't as strong, I'd say, on the top end when you look at it in comparison to him. The tight end class is a little bit strong, but I think you'd rather kind of get an impact player like a running back in early. Do you think there's a chance that he ends up going like a lot higher than people think, like he could possibly end up like a top 5, top 8 pick?
Top 5 seems a little rich for me. I think, although, if you're the Cardinals and you swap down, I don't know how they would stay in the top 10 and still have, like, if the Raiders, let's say the Raiders moved up to 3. If the Raiders were convinced they needed Anthony Richardson. I know they got Garoppolo now, but even then, like, you better make sure you have your backup.
Right.
But if somebody like that dropped down, I think Arizona could be frisky in the fact of, like, you do need playmakers. And I think the NFL is getting to the point, and Chad Ryder made this point with me on my podcast, the Sick Podcast, is that the NFL is getting to a point of, like, positionless football, and you want to go out there and just draft a good football player. And even though these aren't great comps, like skill set wise, but if you think about what the Jacksonville Jaguars did with Travis Etienne, where, like, you shouldn't be drafting a running back in the first round, but it's at the same time, he fits so many different molds and does so many different things well. There's like, you're just drafting a good football player. And I was doing a redraft of the 2021 season, and I get to that spot of what was it, 24, 23, wherever they were picking. And you're like, to me, that was a good pick. That was one I look at and I'm like, yeah, it took a little bit of time. But at the end of the year, when the Jags started making the run towards the playoffs, ETN was a very valuable piece to the point like James Robinson. Where is he now? New England? Like, I forget where he ended up. Like, you're like, yeah, I forgot about him. I think that Robinson's a better prospect, and there are a lot of teams that could really benefit from having him. And I think that if he got far enough, I in my mock, I had him going to the Chargers at 21. Chargers are 21. The Ravens are 22. Both those teams make sense. I thought about the Commanders again of like, man, like at this point, you got to realize like they're probably going to have a new quarterback next year. And if he comes into a team that has Bijan Robinson, McLaurin signed long-term, they've done a nice job of acquiring some pieces. I'm like, that's not a bad fit. So I think that, like you said, he has the talent of being a top 5 guy, but he's not going to be. Or what about, they're probably going to trade their first round pick. But like, there's even the Jets. I know the Jets have Breece Hall. I was like, God, what if the Jets, I was thinking about that the other day. I'm like, what if the Jets just did it? Like you bring in Aaron
100%.
Rodgers and you're like, the Jets were just like, let's do it. Let's just go all in. Because you don't know what Breece Hall is going to be able to do. And what's the problem with having Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson? Making your team even more unstoppable.
100%.
I'm starting to buy into that.
Yeah.
And I think somebody should take the risk.
And even when you look at the receiver class, like if you're talking about like who I'd rather have at like, 15 or something, if you're talking about like a Quentin Johnston or like, maybe Jalen Hyatt ends up pushing his way upwards. Like I know who I'd rather take there when I'm talking about one of the most productive running backs in college football versus, a guy who definitely has some warts on his resume,
That's a great point. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba, just based on some of the conversations I've had with Steve Smith Sr., I really like him as a prospect. I think he comes in and makes an immediate impact. I think he's going to be very good. But outside of him, I'm with you. I would not want any one of those wide receivers. And I'm to the point of Dalton Kincaid should be the second pass catcher off the board.
Yep.
Like, let's not mess around with that. Like, I don't care. I can't even, like, it doesn't matter. Like, Zay Flowers, any of those guys. Dalton Kincaid should be the next pass catcher. I would even, Darnell Washington fulfills a unique role. Even like Luke Musgrave, you're like, if I'm looking at Quentin Johnson and Luke Musgrave, I'm like, I might almost want Musgrave just because of the way he stretches the field. And if he went to a team like the Chiefs, who obviously they've got Travis Kelce, but you're like, God, you put that guy on that team with another field stretcher, like that could be pretty nice.
Speaking my language right now, man. Speaking my language.
Adam, you wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago around the best revenge games that we're going to see in 2023. But do you have a favorite revenge game, NFL moment or game? I'm thinking like Talib Crabtree, and maybe another piece like you mentioned Vince McMahon earlier. Could the NFL learn from WWE or AEW about like selling the revenge side of things a little bit more? We only tend to hear about it when it's a QB going back to their former team. But can you imagine if Vince had Crabtree versus Talib? That would have been he would have sold that.
Like the fantasy people always do a really good job of finding these narratives and going up and like, oh yeah, these teams rematching and everything like that. And I do love, like Detroit's got their hands in a bunch of them. Like Detroit's got a bunch of things going on. Like I would kick off the season, even though my dream would be that there's no interdivision games for the first 3 weeks of the season, that you only play your out of conference teams or you do that. And then week 4 becomes rivalry week, where you play your biggest rival. It would be Bears, Packers, Rams, 49ers, Dallas, again, like take your pick with the Cowboys. But, like that kind of like Steelers, Ravens, that kind of stuff. And then sell that whole week, like rivalry week, like blood rivals going against each other. Because like week 4 is kind of like, the interest is starting to wane a little bit. If you wanted to push it back to week 5, I'm with you as well. Because speaking of buys, I would not have the buys start until week 8. And then I would have 2 divisions in weeks 8 9, 10, 11. We would just rotate it every year. One year you're 8 and 9, and you just roll it over. Like, this doesn't need to be more complicated than you make it out to be. There's some guy in an office in New York City who makes this scheduling seem so difficult. Oh, we got to worry about, the Ravens share a parking lot. Like, nobody drives the games anymore. Like, and that's an American thing of like, F your car. I'm tired of your car dictating sports schedules. I don't care. Like, I love, and I'm not a Ducks fan, but I love when there's an Angels day game with like a Ducks playing at night, and you go and you're like, let's hit both. Like, let's see if we can do both or do whatever. I love taking the train from Anaheim down to San Diego to see an Angels and a Padres. Whoever's got the day game going down and seeing the other play at night. It usually works better for me to have Anaheim being the night game because then I can go home and don't have to go to a hotel. But that being said, number one, bye weeks, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's it. Middle of the season, you're ready to go. As a matter of fact, and once you get to the idiotic 18 games and you're going to need 2 bye weeks, why don't you just have the whole NFL off in week 4? What would be week 4? So everybody can just rest. And then you have your bye weeks again start up in week like 10, 11, 12, 10, 11, 12, 13, or 9, whatever it is. Like, do it that way. And then when you come back from that week off, that's when rivalry week starts.
Ooh.
And you lay into it. And you go crazy and you do all that stuff. And you'll make your TV money. Don't worry about it. You're fine. People will still watch. Week 5 just hits the rivalry week and everybody's dialed in and ready to go. And you can set your calendar to it every year. You know that one year that game's going to be in Green Bay. The next year it's going to be in Arlington Heights. And you can set it up and plan it. And it's a huge event. But I think one of my favorites, and I know this is a quarterback, I love when Michael Vick went up against, what was that Monday night game? It was against Washington, where they were talking S on him. It was a Monday night game, and it also was like a very important fantasy week, too. And I remember going into that game needing 3 points from Michael Vick and going against my buddy. And then first play of the game, Michael Vick throws the touchdown bomb. I had the text ready to go. You lost. I love that kind of stuff. We don't get to see that enough anymore. But, this is what I was going to say. So even though I hate division rivalries, I would start this season. The Sunday night game has to be Lions-Packers. You know, if this was the WWE, you know, the Lions would they would owe the Packers a win based on the Packers doing the job in week 30, whatever. Week 18. That sounds so stupid. Yeah, the Packers deserve to get their loss back. So open it up. It's like the WrestleMania rematch for SummerSlam. Like, make it happen. That's what I would do. I would open it up with the Packers. It should be the Thursday night game, but Sunday night I would settle for. Or
You got to
even
get you
Monday.
in connection with Roger.
100%. I think Monday actually is a pretty good one. Monday would be pretty, because Mondays feel big again because they got Aikman and Buck. So it's like, this feels like an event again. When it was, no disrespect to whoever was calling, I don't know, Carl Ravage. I don't know who was calling the games before, but like that, no disrespect. That came off like a 12 Eastern Big Ten matchup between Iowa State and Northwestern. But now you got Buck and Aikman, and it's a huge event.
Adam, I have a funny feeling the NFL are going to want to try get Rodgers on Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football when he's with
That's
the Jets.
fine.
We've won.
It's fine. It's fine. I understand what you got to do. I get it. I get.
Let's see Hackett back in Denver week 1. That's what I want to see.
That too. All right.
Adam, we're going to close it with one question from the audience who are watching the show, and it's a question on the. No, it's all good. It's a question on the Cowboys, and someone looking for your opinion as to what you think the Cowboys should do in the first round of the draft. Should they go tight end, D-line, defensive line, or safety with the first pick? You've done a couple of mock drafts. What are you suggesting with the Cowboys in the tricky position that they're at?
Yeah, they're in an interesting spot. I think I honestly believe that Luke Musgrave is going to fall And so if you can get him in the second round, I would go there. Defensive line would make a lot of sense at some point. But I think that, for the Cowboys to be successful, you got to go back to being dominant on the offensive line. And I'm not sure who's going to fall to them, at what spot, who could be there. Torrance, was it Torrance O'Shaughnessy? What is a
The Florida guard,
gosh,
Osiris
the
Torrance.
Florida guy?
Yep.
Oh my gosh, I always get I come up with so many different variations, like Dalton Kincaid. You're like, that's not even close. But in any event, I do like the idea of addressing the offensive line. And I know that it's not always the sexiest of picks, but it's been the smartest picks. And I will say this about the Dallas Cowboys. They've done an exceptional job of drafting over the last number of years. I question them trading away Amari Cooper last season. But when it comes to the draft, the Dallas Cowboys, they seem to hit it out of the park every year. I remember, as a matter of fact, being at Radio City Music Hall the year when they drafted Zach Martin. And if you recall, Johnny Manziel was still on the board, and Radio City Music Hall was ready to go ape shit. Oh, I'm sorry. Can I work blue here? I'm so sorry. I should have said ape feces. Actually,
it's Ireland. It's all good.
I said ape feces one time, and somebody got offended. Said that was worse than just saying ape shit. Ape feces sounds so much more gross.
It really
than just
paints a
saying ape
picture,
shit. Yes. But the place was like Radio City Music Hall was such a fun place to have a draft. And I'm bummed that we don't do it. But, credit to the NFL. It's a traveling circus now. You would go to Radio City Music Hall, and I kid you not, like New York City being what it is, amazing town. But like outside of that radius of Radio City Music Hall, nobody knew what was going on. I remember going into a little sushi restaurant, eating, and the waitress, she's like, "Oh, what are you in town for?" I'm like, "The NFL draft." She's like, "What's that?" Like, it's right around the corner. Like, it's the thing that, it's like, oh, there's always events going on. Like, couldn't have cared less. So it is nice to go to, and I know that Kansas City is going to be epic, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and God bless them for being able to host that the year after they win the Super Bowl. What a great little twist for them. It makes up for the Royals. But I will say that I was in that building when the Cowboys, and a lot of people thought they were going to go with Johnny Manziel, and it seemed like such a Jerry Jones type of thing to do. But they took Zach Martin, who went out there and perennial All-Pro, a guy who's probably going to go to the Hall of Fame. Like, they make smart picks.
Mm-hmm.
So if I think they get back to that, of making a smart pick on the offensive line, we'll figure out who it is. I'll let Jerry do his scouting. He's done a great job of it in the past. He doesn't need my input. But I would tell him, if he called me up right now and said, "What are we doing?" I'm like, "Got to address the offensive line, Jerry." And then I think you guys can be back because you'll make it work.
Adam, we want to thank you. As always, this has been brilliantly entertaining. And
Has it?
Oh,
I'm never being invited back again, am I?
Oh, you absolutely.
You made
will
fun
be.
of my headphones, man. It's done.
Yeah.
They're egregious. Like, I'm not the only one seeing this, right? They're egregious.
Show them around the entire city. See if I care, man. See if I care.
There, we love everything you bring.
I can't. You know what? I'm jealous because I can't wear the big headphones. Because if I do, as a bald man, then I look like Lobot from Empire Strikes Back.
Okay, maybe a little Mickey
So
Mouse.
I got to be very
action, yeah.
careful.
Adam, he just came from the airport. He was finishing up his shift at the airport, so he forgot to take them off
Flag
on the
him.
way back.
I got the
All
lights
those
back
people
there and
flying into
everything.
that
Oshkosh.
we're gonna have to mock up an image of that now, Frankie. But Adam, always enjoy seeing you on our screens. Enjoy your podcast with our good friend Karma Vitali as well. And we want to wish you continued success. And we hope that at some point we will get to welcome you to this little green island. But for now, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to do it again. And that's it. That's all I got. It's a lot of
Cheers.
time.
Thanks,
care.
Adam.
Usually entertaining as always, Adam Rank from NFL Network, who has a busy evening ahead of him. I think he's on Total Access at midnight our time. He touched on Odell Beckham. I think we'll close out with that. I know me and Colin discussed it during the week. Frankie, I didn't get an opportunity to get your thoughts on the Beckham contract in particular.
On Beckham, honestly, it still depends upon the Lamar Jackson domino. It seems like a decent move for them. Lamar OBJ is incredibly talented. I'm excited to see what he can do. You know, with when he's fully healthy again. I think he is obviously a very effective receiver, but a question of how much he'll be able to be available throughout the season and kind of like, I don't know. I don't necessarily love it because I kind of wish that this team would stop going for guys that are a bit past their prime, and I wish they would actually get Lamar Jackson a true weapon. But you know what? You can't hate on getting him an eventual Hall of Famer. So move I don't mind.
Colin, a lot of mock drafts have the Ravens going wide receiver despite the Beckham move. And another reason for Lamar to come back if they continue to build around them, or is it too little, too late?
We'll see. I mean, Adam touched on it. I mean, they hold a lot of the cards here. Can they woo him back? You know, I mean, when we talked to Florio, he pointed out Lamar is principle. So could it be that Lamar just decides that, you know, the number isn't worth it? I mean, think about it. Deshaun Watson sat like for a year, was forced to sit because of his behavior, and that didn't drop his value in any way, shape, or form. If Lamar Jackson decides to sit out, an infinitely better human being, you know, an incredible threat. I think the number has to be right for Lamar to come back. But this is it. This is the Ravens trying to woo Lamar. They probably should have done this 3 years ago.
Whilst we were talking to Adam Rank, it's been confirmed in principle that the deal for the Raiders, sorry, not the Raiders, the Commanders sale has essentially gone through, and again, it's to be formally ratified by the league. But it looks like we're finally there, Colin, after 2 or 3 years of discussing this and numerous podcasts and numerous guests around, in particular with Peter King and the likes. It looks like it's finally come to pass that the Commanders are now going to have new ownership. And I'd be interested to see what this new ownership has in store. It was very evident, very clear what the Broncos' new ownership wanted to do from day one. So it'd be interesting to see what their goals or aspirations are when we do finally get to a stage where there's an opening press conference.
Well, you imagine that they have to be better than Dan Schneider, but I mean that is essentially being taller than Danny DeVito, and so to me, this is a great day for the league writ large. That it's moving on from Dan Schneider. I will say it that I think the league should be ashamed of the way they've covered for Schneider for years, the way in which they have basically held back the report into Schneider until the team is sold. I wonder, will that now be shelved because, well, he's gone and what can we do? So look, it's a great day. That's a once proud franchise, which was absolutely incredible during the 80s into the early 90s, and they have become a shell of themselves. The stadium is falling apart. We had Adam there talking about Jalen Hurts, who he sees really as the number one QB in the NFC. Jalen Hurts could have, broken a leg quite easily. Remember when the thing collapsed there? So I think it'll be good for everybody that we should no longer, hopefully, have raw sewage running through and raining down on top of fans' heads at an NFL stadium.
Yeah, and I just want to I just want to say, like, they've got a long road to go, man. I mean, like, when you talk about, like, comparing it to the Broncos, like, the Broncos have been a successful, like, historic franchise. The Commanders, the football team, whatever you want to call them, they've been the past few years, they've been kind of the butt of the league, the butt of the jokes of the league. Like, they aren't, as, raw sewage, perfect example. The entire stadium is falling apart, like, this is a front office that's going to really have to win back some goodwill, not only with the fans, but with the league as a whole, like this is not going to be as simple as them making a couple free agent signings. I think people love the Commanders again. I think this is going to be a bit of a process, and I'm sure they knew that, but it'll be very interesting seeing, what steps they take. Because obviously, like, first things first, they're going to have to fix up that stadium quite a bit. They're going to have to do a lot of things to kind of reprimand a lot of the things that disgusting Dan Schneider was able to get away with for so many years under the supervision of the league.
Interesting story. It will evolve even more so in the lead up to the draft. I think we'll close it out there. Colin, we have a number of podcasts over the course of the next few days coming out.
Yeah, so we've had some kind of great podcasts over the last week or so, over the past few weeks, really, and would definitely urge people to check those out because it is not just our live shows that have been going out on Thursdays. There have been podcast content going out, talking to fans around the league. A couple of brothers from down here in County Cork talking about the sibling rivalry. We've had podcasts focusing on Notre Dame, podcasts from fans kind of and journalists and throughout the league that's going to continue over the next few weeks. Please do check out the podcast. If you enjoy the podcast, definitely rate, review, and subscribe. It makes a huge difference and helps other people to find us.
Yeah, it's just a 2 weeks NFL draft of round one from Kansas City. Another bonus episode of the Irish NFL show tomorrow evening. We'll go out, myself and Frankie. We're fortunate to catch up with Matt Miller, ESPN NFL draft analyst. We spoke to him earlier today. That will go out tomorrow evening. Really good interview. Speaks a lot about the draft. You get into the insight of all the various different areas in which he's covering for ESPN, so that's well worth to watch tomorrow evening. It will also go out, as Colin said, as part of the podcast portfolio as well. For now, guys, appreciate it. Look forward to your company next week, and as an entertaining show with Adam Rank. So totally enjoyed it. Enjoyed your company. Looking forward again to next week.
Have a good night, guys.